Good morning, everyone. Oh, hey, good morning. First of all, apologies for speaking in English. I hope that's okay. I will speak slowly. My name is Eric White. I am the head of climate adaptation at the World Economic Forum in Geneva. And in that role, I work with businesses globally, the risks that are emerging from climate change and developing strategies for how they go forward. So I always like to start with a little bit of a shock. Oh, sorry, they gave me a new intro slide. This was my intro slide. I'm calling it this talk is called the Climate Transformation, and you'll see why at the end. This is the shock. Does anybody know where that is? Okay, that's Libya last September, when a rain event triggered a flash flood that collapsed a dam and killed anywhere between 4,000 and 20,000 people, we don't really know, in a city whose pre-event population was 90,000. So it killed up to one-third of the people that lived in the city. The rain event that triggered this would have been classified as a 1 in 600 year event in pre-industrial climate conditions. So there is no way the dam was built to withstand this. You don't build a dam for a 1 in 600 year event. But under current climate conditions, the probability of this event occurring, it has become a 1 in 12 year event. That is a 50-fold increase in likelihood. And it means it will happen again within a decade or so. So do you rebuild this city? I don't know. Now, that's an extreme example. There are many more mundane examples. I tried to pick something that might be relevant for some of you here. This was the European weather map on Wednesday, July 24th this year. I mean, it was hot here. It was really hot in the south. I mean, I think we get heat waves. We all know we get heat waves. But they're becoming more and more frequent and more severe. So this was a 1 in 10 year event under pre-industrial conditions. It's now every year. And it was 3 degrees hotter than it would have been. And I put this up here because 38 degrees in wet bulb will kill you. If this happens for multiple days, crops fail, infrastructure fails. Not this heat wave, but a different time last year, London had a 40-degree day. They had not had a 40-degree day before. So a bunch of city government officials did a scenario exercise, like a tabletop war game exercise. And they said, what happens if we just add a second 40-degree day? And what they saw was that social cohesion started to break down. Specifically, elderly people in tall buildings, the elevators broke because they lost power. They couldn't get out. The food supply started to dwindle because the freezers broke. And you started to have chaos. They didn't even bother adding a third because it would have it was clear where it was going. The police would have to be deployed if they had 3. So why do I say that? This is sort of the big picture. So there's 2 questions. First, what's actually happening here? I think a lot of people have a vague understanding that, okay, climate change, but what specifically is happening? And then what does it mean for business? So what specifically is happening? This is, you've all seen something like this in school. This is the hydrological cycle, right? This particular diagram comes from a report released last week by the Global Commission on the Economics of Water. What's specifically happening is this whole cycle is getting turbocharged. It's happening in greater volume more quickly. And the trigger is that if you warm air by 1 degree centigrade, it holds 7% more water vapor. So that means more of it is flowing up, When you get these heavier, denser clouds, it disrupts sort of the traditional airflows that we're used to. They go further. And so you actually have places that are net exporters of water in the hydrological cycle and places that are net importers of water via the hydrological cycle. And the places that are net exporters are getting drier and drier and hotter, and the places that are net importers are getting wetter and wetter. Oh, thank you. But because these clouds are so heavy, you can get diversions. And then you can get things that, like an airstream may change in an unexpected way, and that's why you get things like the Dubai airport getting 5 inches of rain in a day, like happened in April. Now, here, we are in Spain, a net exporter of water via the hydrological cycle. Actually, a pretty significant one, because you see the triangle is relatively big. So what does that mean? Hotter and hotter, drier and drier. I've heard people use the word desertification, right? So that's the situation we're in, and that's what's happening. Now, what does it mean for a business? Right? Because we often think of this as a problem for the government. So this comes from a piece of work that the Forum did with PwC at the end of 2022. There's three reasons. Well, there's three ways to think about this as a business. One is your own operational risk and resilience and avoiding economic losses. If you go through self-reported impacts to CDP, which is the Climate Disclosure Project, businesses often voluntarily disclose information to CDP, and you tally up what businesses say their climate risk is, it amounts to 10% of their top line and 4% of their valuation, on average, that is at risk from this. And that's just self-reported. And I think some of that is, if I listen to some of the people in these businesses that make these reports, so they're probably underreported. The next thing is you capitalize on opportunities. Your markets will change, not just your operations and your supply chain, but your downstream. Your customers are going to want different stuff in different places at different times. How's that going to impact you? And then the third thing, shape collaborative outcomes. The way to think about this is we are all used to receiving services from the government in terms of infrastructure, roads, et cetera, that they may or may not be able to continue to provide to the same level in the face of this challenge. So the United Nations Environment Program publishes a report every year called the Adaptation Gap that has just shocking numbers. It says that we need like 300 billion a year, every year, between now and 2030 to adapt. And that's just in the global south, right? So there's just giant sums of money that are needed. And there need to be creative ways that businesses can partner with community organizations and governments to fill this. There's a good example that Facebook did in the San Francisco Bay, where they put in $7 million and as part of a consortium that was building a seawall around the bay, they covered the area in front of their campus. Because they participated, the consortium was able to unlock a federal matching grant, and a whole bunch more money came in, and the whole thing got built. And it cost a relatively small amount of money for Facebook itself. So you can look for things like that. Now, this is sort of the generic case. I understand that this one right here, enhanced resilience, that's really hard. Like, that's really hard for a lot of reasons in a business. There's internal politics that get in the way. There are risk processes within businesses that sort of have their own life and look at their own things and have cycles of 5 years. But there's lots of resources out here to help you with this. Lots of toolkits, lots of folks that have made significant efforts to kind of break out of their bureaucratic constraints that they face inside their company. And when they do that, they deliver exceptional value. There are some good examples. So a mining company, a big one, did this, and they found they actually needed to change the way they depreciated their capital on their balance sheets. And that led to a whole bunch of investments that they feel position them for greater value in the future. That's just one example. But I like to talk about this middle one, because there's a lot of resources for the first. So this is from BlackRock, end of last year, December 2023. The report was called Climate Resilience in Emerging Asset Class. Asset class is an overused term, but I think you get the point. They started to look at the opportunity for new value creation in climate adaptation. And these are the areas they described. I think in food and agriculture, this is relatively well known. New seed varieties are the obvious example. But there's a lot of other places where this starts to come through that you might not think about. And this includes financial products and services that will be demanded. There was a report by BCG done, when was it? Within the last year, where they looked through Crunchbase and they found hundreds of companies that have been started in these domains, and their average valuation was a multiple of 9x. Like, venture capital money is starting to go here. You may have, if anybody remembers 5 or 6 years ago, how there were about 1,000 startups that would help you do your ESG accounting within your business. This is the new thing. So it's very hot, but it means it's coming. And incumbents can do a lot. And this is actually like the real message I want to deliver to you all in this room. Many of the most well-positioned large global businesses will not pay attention to this because they have their minds overly focused on mitigation. My view, and I go around the world saying this, is that large businesses based in countries that are going to be among the first to feel the impacts of climate change in a severe way, and Spain is among those countries, have the ability to innovate here and provide the products and services that the world needs. And if you in your company can get your strategy people thinking about this, and not just your sustainability people, you will unlock a lot more resources. Because if your sustainability manager goes to the COO and says, we need to think about risks differently, they'll say, like, yeah, well, tell me that when I figure out how I'm going to deal with generative AI, right? But if your strategy people go and say, actually, the market we operate in is changing, we think we could provide these services and these services, minimizing somebody else's risk, that gets your business thinking about risk in a different way, and that will percolate back into your own company. So it's a way of sort of short-circuiting some of the challenges in dealing with risk management in a traditional way. So I think Anna mentioned Johan Rockström at the top of this meeting. So Johan told me a story about rainwater harvesting. So rainwater harvesting, if you're not familiar with it, it's a technique that helps ensure a consistent supply of water for agriculture in arid places. It was developed in India originally, and it was deployed extensively through Africa with money from bilateral donors and the World Bank as like a poverty alleviation kind of tool. Some Israelis got really interested because they have the Negev desert and they try to do agriculture there. And so there was an Israeli company that had kind of a tech-first approach to rainwater harvesting that got some of this donor money to do projects in Africa. And they have developed their solution to the point where they have now entered Scandinavia and they're selling advanced rainwater harvesting technology to farmers in Sweden and Norway who can no longer rely on rain-fed agriculture the same way they used to. So it's a product that was developed in the global south being sold into the global north, which is very interesting. It sort of indicates that you can flip the script on the flows of trade in climate adaptation. So this is my final slide, and sorry, it's kind of a bad slide. I ran out of time. This is why the talk is called the climate transformation. Think about climate change like you think about the digital transformation. What was the digital transformation? For many of you, because I don't think there's too many big Silicon Valley players here, the digital transformation was exogenous. It came from the outside and it impacted your businesses. In the Audis, many people didn't understand it. They set up a vertical to deal with it. Like, you can be the chief technology officer or the CIO, and you're going to help us digitize. Sounds a lot like chief sustainability officer. You're going to help us be net zero. Same approach. But what happened is it soon became clear that this was an extreme horizontal that touched everything. And you couldn't contain it into a vertical. It both posed a huge risk for companies if they didn't move, but it also created a chance for all sorts of new value for those that did. So if you think about it that way, you'll be a little bit less, you'll be more likely to be able to take effective action. And the other thing about that's sort of just to complete the metaphor, just like digital transformation, the government is not going to be able to sort of keep this thing at bay for you, right? It's just like they struggle to keep up with rules about AI. They're going to struggle to keep up with rules about how, to protect you from the impacts of climate change. So let's get ahead of it. Start thinking about it from a strategy perspective. And there's a huge amount of work that can be done, and there's leadership. There's open opportunities for leadership in this space, and I encourage you all to take them up. Thank you very much.